Testing, testing. I don't hear anything, do we?
Testing. Can you hear me?
Well, I can hear a little bit.
Welcome to the City Council District 10 Candidate Forum. This forum is sponsored by the City of Austin Ethics Review Commission and moderated by the Austin League of Women Voters. I'm Frances McIntyre with the Austin League. The League of Women Voters is now celebrating its 96th year. It was formed out of the suffragette movement to give women the vote in 1920. We are a nonpartisan political organization with both men and women members that promotes the informed and active participation of citizens in government. The League does not support or oppose candidates or parties. The League members who are helping out tonight are Carol Eckelkamp, Jackie Collins, Jackie Williams, Lauren Kerrigan, Sandra Ragona, and one other person. This forum is being televised live on ATXN TV and is being recorded to be played many times and will be on the League website which is lwvaustin.org, at a later date. We are also very pleased to have our Spanish translator here today, and she has been here for all the forums. There are 3x5 cards on the table when you came in. If you want to ask a question, please write it on that and hold it up, and we'll come get it, and we will ask as many as time permits. Our candidates are seated in ballot order. The format tonight will be as follows. We will start with 2-minute opening and 2 minutes for the questions. Our timekeeper will hold up the cards denoting the time you have left. And candidate, keep your eyes on the timekeeper. When the red stop comes, pay attention. If we are running short of time, we may reduce the response time to 1 minute so we can get more questions in. All the questions originate from the League with input from the public, and they are unknown to the candidates. Before we begin, let me state that the views expressed here are those of the candidates and not of the sponsor, the Ethics Review Commission, or the moderator, the Austin League. Please make sure your electronic devices are turned so that we will not hear a peep from them. According to the guidelines of the League of Women Voters, there must be no applause or demonstrations of support or opposition from visitors to this room. At the end of the forum, you will be allowed to show your enthusiasm. Candidates are asked to refrain from any personal references or attacks to their opponents. Just answer the issue-related questions. Welcome, candidates. We applaud your interest in serving as the District 10 representative. We will now begin with the 2-minute opening statements with the first person on the ballot, Ms. Gallo.
Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for holding this forum for my neighbors. I am Sheri Gallo, and I'm the current City Council member representing District 10. I also want to thank you to the people that are here because I know your lives are busy and you could be many other places, so thank you. 2 years ago, my promise to the people of District 10 was to not only be a good leader, but to be a great listener. During the past 2 years, my staff and I have spent our weekends and evenings attending over 500 neighborhood meetings and community events. I have hosted 8 town halls on a variety of subjects and brought city expertise into District 10 neighborhoods. I have listened to my community and worked together to find solutions to the big issues like increasing traffic congestion and slowing down our affordability crisis. I've heard very clearly that District 10 residents want the City Council to stop increasing their property tax and utility bills every year. Over the past 2 years, I have been an advocate for affordability and controlling city spending. I have voted to implement the full 20% homestead tax exemption, increase the senior and disabled tax exemption so our seniors can stay in their homes if they want to. I voted against the new budget because it will result in higher tax bills and utility bills. I have also focused on issues that specifically affect District 10, Loop 360 traffic improvements, implementing new wildfire protection plans, increasing funding for public safety, improving our parks and libraries. But my focus has not just been on these big issues, but also on the smaller issues that affect you every day. Speeding on your neighborhood streets, missing sidewalks, safer routes for your children to get to school. Fixing those problems, they may be small, but they do make a difference in people's lives, and they add up to make our neighborhoods better and safer. It has been an absolute honor to represent District 10. I have worked really hard, and I am proud of the work that I have done. Thank you.
Mr. Walker.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me here tonight. I want to thank I want to thank you so much for inviting me here tonight. I want to thank the League of Women Voters. My wife's great-grandfather was a delegate to the Arizona Constitutional Convention and was an advocate for suffragette rights and voted in the granting of the vote to women in the Arizona Territory well before our federal government did so. So I'm thankful for that tradition in our family. Anyway, there are three big issues that Austin faces right now, among others: traffic, taxes, and the planned unit developments. And I'm against the mobility bond because 2/3 of it is going to beautification rather than to traffic relief. Only about 1/7 is actually going to help with traffic congestion relief, and that's very troubling to me. I think that we need to have a traffic-centric bond, and I'm going to, if this bond is defeated, propose an alternate bond of similar magnitude, and of that bond, perhaps 80% will go to traffic relief. 360 needs $300 million in order to turn it into a limited access freeway, and I'm going to advocate that as part of the bond. The PUDs, I'm against the Austin Oaks at the level of build-out that it is right now. I think when it's completed, there are going to be 55 cars per minute boiling out of there onto the streets, whereas right now it's every minute during rush hour, whereas right now it's only 11 cars. I also support the Bull Creek Road Coalition position for limited build-out of the Grove. And I will talk about taxes a little later. Thank you.
Mr. Virden.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So my name is Nick Virden. I'm a 23-year-old resident of District 10. I went to Anderson High School just down the road from here. Lived here all my life. I'm actually a martial arts instructor in the district, and so I've got to deal with, got to talk a lot to the community about, the issues that are really important to D10. Some other things that I think qualify me for this position are that I was actually the president of a political club at UT Austin called Young Americans for Liberty, and I was also an intern at the Texas State Capitol, so I know a thing or two about public policy. So diving into the issues, just a broad overview of the issues that I'll hopefully be talking to you about tonight, and if not, then, I get them in here. I'm all for relaxing our zoning and land use laws so that we can make our communities more affordable. Again, just like Sheri, lowering taxes and making sure that we are responsibly budgeting for the city. Multimodal transportation, things like freeing up resources for bus transportation, and then also bringing companies like Uber and Lyft back to the table to advocate for more transportation options for Austinites. Tech innovation, making sure that we're promoting innovation in Austin instead of driving it out. And of course, making sure that our minority communities, whether that is ethnic minorities or gender minorities, are treated just as fairly as the as other groups that are antagonistic to them. Thank you.
Ms.
Good
Alter.
evening. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for being engaged, and thank you for getting informed. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this tonight and allowing us to inform the rest of the city about what's going on in District 10. I'm Alison Alter, and I want to represent the people of District 10 on the City Council. I have over 20 years of experience in higher education and with nonprofits. I have a PhD from Harvard in political economy and government. I am affectionately known as the Parks Lady for my work on Ramsey Park and my work on the City of Austin Parks Board. I'm a small business owner. I'm a former university professor. I'm a neighborhood advocate. I'm a mom of 2 middle schoolers, and my husband, Jeremy Surrey, is a professor at UT. I'm running because I believe that the city should be solving problems. The city should be creating an environment in which all people can thrive. Over the last several years, I've seen how the sausage gets made, and I'll be honest, I don't like the sausage that's coming out or how it's getting made. I'm running because I don't like the kind of city that we will be if we continue to allow a few special interests to write the rules, dictate the agendas, and tie the city in knots. We have real choices to make about the kind of city we aspire to be, how and where we grow, and who benefits from that prosperity. Each of us up here is going to look at the decisions that come before council through a different lens and with different priorities. I hope you'll have an opportunity to learn what those are tonight. I believe we need to manage growth responsibly, protect and enhance our open spaces, invest in our children, and make City Hall work for all of us. District 10 needs someone who puts community first. I want to be that fresh voice. I ask you to vote Alison Alter this November. Thank you.
We'll be starting, the responses will be starting with Mr. Walker. So our first question about traffic and parklands. In District 10 and part of District 7, there is a controversial land use project, the Grove at Shoal Creek Planned Unit Development. Neighborhoods close to 45th and Bull Creek Road and beyond have been active in protesting various aspects of the developer's plans. 2 of the major concerns are increased traffic and inadequate parkland near Shoal Creek. Do you support this project? Why or why not? Mr. Walker.
I do not support the current level of development that's being proposed by the developer at the Grove. It's going to really stress the roads. My wife, who drives through there regularly, says, "My word, what's it going to be like after that's built out?" And there are 1,900 residents there and 360,000 square feet of commercial space. The parkland is what the developers offered is a space that is sloped and not particularly useful as parkland. So I think the Bull Creek Road Coalition has come up with a very reasonable alternative to it. And I think if the developer can't live within the constraints of Bull Creek Road Coalition's proposal, then I think the city should come up with the money to buy it back, and we'll have a northern form of Zilker Park in Austin. Austin does not have enough parkland. Given the growth of this city, I mean, there's been very little increase in parks over the years, given the significant increase in population. So I definitely support the Bull Creek Road Coalition's position on it. Thank you.
Mr. Virden.
Just didn't want to get any feedback there. Yeah, of course. I support the same position. So right now, I think that with the current infrastructure around that area, the Grove is not a great development for the people that live near it. And I would support some sort of other plan, such as the Bull Creek Road Coalition's plan to, redevelop that area into something a little more friendly to the neighborhood. With only 1 lane going each way on Bull Creek and 2 lanes going on a very narrow 45th Street, I can see a lot of accidents and things like that happening from increased traffic. So again, I am currently opposed to the current Grove proposition.
Ms. Alter.
Thank you. I currently do not support the proposed PUD as presented. This is a development that had a lot of neighborhood feedback before the property was even bought. The neighbors communicated very clearly 3 top concerns: traffic, drainage and flooding, and parkland. In a plan unit development, it has to be superior on any number of things in order to receive the extra zoning benefits. In this case, there is no doubt that this PUD is not superior on any of those 3 issues. The Parks Board, the Parks Department declared it not superior on parks. As we know, there's a lot of questions about the traffic questions. And then on drainage, they have said that if you do A or B, which are both the minimal, then that makes it superior. I'm a former professor, and something that gets a grade of a D is not superior. This PUD is not ready to go forward.
Ms. Gallo.
Thank you. You know, the property that we're talking about is unzoned. And so the question is, what will it be zoned to? It will be either zoned to traditional zoning or it will be zoned to a PUD. The benefit to the community of a PUD is that we can ask for additional benefits to the community that are in comparison to what we can't get with traditional zoning. So, for example, parkland. With a PUD, we can ask for more parkland, so it's superior. That means we'll get more parkland than the traditional zoning. My office is working very hard, and I've pledged not to support this project until we can reach superiority on the parkland component of it, and we're still working towards that. The other issue is affordable housing. We all know that we need affordable housing in this community, and on a regular traditional zoning, we cannot, as a city, the state law will not allow us to ask for affordable housing. So the way that we can get affordable housing into a very high-cost neighborhood is through a PUD. So that's another benefit. The traffic is a problem. You know, the development, the property can be developed. The city staff has estimated with traditional zoning, they can be developed up to probably up to 1.9 million square feet. At this point, our conversation is between 2.4 to 2.5. So will traffic increase? Yes, it's going to increase regardless. But what the advantage that we get with a PUD, if we find the right fit, and the right fit is really important because it has to be a benefit to the community. It has to have the character of the neighborhood as part of it, and that's what I want to make sure that happens. But with the traffic, in a PUD, the developer can be required to do traffic mitigation up front before the project is complete, so that traffic is mitigated and resolved and handled prior to that, rather than putting money in a fund if it's traditional zoning and maybe it gets spent, maybe it doesn't, and that's what's been happening in the past. So what I support is a plan that will be a benefit to the neighborhood, that will reflect the character of the neighborhood, and one that we all work together to try to get closer and closer together to come up with a resolution. And it comes before the council this Thursday.
All right, this next question will start, Mr. Virden. We will be starting with you. What is your opinion of the Austin Police Department and the services it provides? Please express your opinion about the use of body cameras, community policing, and the racial and social sensitivities we are experiencing in many areas of Austin.
So I'm definitely a big advocate of body cameras. I think that helps, like I was talking about earlier in my opening statement, I think it helps protect our most vulnerable in the community, such as minorities, which do experience at some point higher, accosting from police or higher scrutiny than some other ethnic groups in the community. Could you repeat some of the other pieces of that, please?
Just more the community policing, the racial and social sensitivities.
Sure. Okay. And then in terms of community policing, I think it definitely makes our police officers, not to say that they're not polite, some of them aren't polite already, but it just makes them more polite. It really gives them a sense of how they're doing in terms of servicing the community. And yeah, I think that's all I have in terms of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Alter.
So Austinites want a first-rate police force, and our police deserve to be treated with respect, and we should expect our police to treat the people of Austin with respect. We are moving in the direction of community policing. In the recent budget, there was a substitution of police at the desk, uniformed police at the desk, with police employees that would be civilians, that would allow for more movement towards community policing, and I believe in this direction that we should move. I do want to point out with body cameras that there's a lawsuit, and so that's a little bit stalled. I believe that the other bidder is suing the city over how that was handled. When we do move forward with body cameras, it's going to be very important that we make sure that we have policies in place for the storage and for how we monitor those films. I do want to say that for District 10, community policing may not be the solution to some of the crime problems that we have in District 10 with respect to property. Some of those answers may come from more patrols. They also may come from more education. People do still leave their doors open, and that, whether it's to their car or to their house, and that does lead to property crimes, and people need to recognize that they have a role to play in solving some of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gallo?
Thank you. Our public safety budget is 70% of our general fund budget, 70%. And we just recently had a report that was called the Matrix Report, because our concern was, as a community, we do want to see more community policing. That's where the police officers actually touch the public, and they're around the public, and there's a visible presence of the officers in our community. But it is balancing the budget, and it's determining how we can most effectively spend our money. But what we were able to get is we were able to add 12 positions. They weren't funded, but they have been allocated so that in the funding cycle during the year, we may be able to add those, or the police department may be able to find money within their existing budget to do that. But the more important thing is we actually added 30 civil positions, and those are the positions that now police sworn officers that can carry guns and protect us, we're actually doing almost desk jobs. And so we are now going to be able to take those new positions, those new parts of the community of the police force, and take the officers back on the street. So it will give us more officers on the street, and I think that is really important. I do support the body cameras. It has been very clear from our community that the community wants those. I think there are a lot of positive benefits to that. We've put on hold the cell phone. You may have heard a little bit of that, the cell phone discussion for now, so that was not budgeted. We also fully funded the forensics lab. You may have heard about the DNA testing kits, so we added positions to go in to help with the forensic lab. But the community policing component is really important. The District 10, because we don't have a lot of violent crimes, we don't shoot and stab each other, the police force resources get put in other parts of the community. So our community policing, I think, is really going to be a distinct advantage for District 10 so that we have more police presence in the area.
Thank you. Mr. Walker?
Thank you. I agree with that. And I think the body cameras, really, they serve two purposes. One is to protect our citizens from excess use of force or inappropriate behavior on the part of our police, but they also protect the police from unreasonable accusations and just simply outright lies by the people who have claimed to have been mistreated by the police. So I think there's a double benefit to it. There is going to be a big expense to it, and I think it's a challenge to the department to come up with those funds. I agree about the community patrolling. The challenges these days is with drive-by shootings and so forth. The life of a police officer is very difficult. I rode around in the graveyard shift in a police car in Houston on Halloween night a few years back, and the best way I could describe that experience for the officers I was with is boredom tinged with fear, because you just never know what's going to come at you, what's going to happen. And so when the police officers face an unexpected situation, it's scary. It's scary for them as well as for their families. So I'm very grateful to Chief Art Acevedo for how he's reached out to the community. My son's a Boy Scout, and Art has reached out to the Boy Scouts and done community service with them. I think, really, I've been very pleased overall with Chief Acevedo's approach to public relations at the police department. Thank you.
The $720 million mobility bond package includes funding for corridor mobility, which adds arterial roads and corridor improvements, local mobility, which funds non-automobile road users such as pedestrians and cyclists, and regional mobility, which addresses congestion and enhances safety. Are you satisfied this will solve much of our congestion and help move people through the city? Please explain. Ms. Alter?
Thank you. So I do support the mobility bond. I think we do need to vote for this transport bond with its $720 million. To answer your very specific question, will it solve all of our problems? No, it won't. We haven't invested in our infrastructure and our road and our transport infrastructure in a very long time, and this is the first down payment of catching us back up to where we are. There are several things in there that are particularly good for District 10 with respect to 360, Spicewood Springs 620, and safer sidewalks. As this moves forward, it's going to be very important that the next council pays clear attention to their oversight role to make sure that it is implemented as promised. As we think about infrastructure, part of the reason that I say it's not going to satisfy everything is infrastructure costs a lot of money. If you compare this to the infrastructure that's going in, say, the Bergstrom Expressway, that part of the highway is going to cost $780 million on its own. And we need to understand that that $720 million in terms of how much infrastructure costs this day with construction costs and all of the safety and liability issues, that it's just a drop in the bucket, and we're going to have to make additional investments. I do want to say one other thing in my last bit of the time. With the transportation bond, because we have been in a situation where we need to fund our infrastructure this way, we have to have a bond that meets the needs of the whole city so that it can pass. We can, in the future, look to alternative ways to find additional money to fund our transport infrastructure. So, for instance, I would advocate for impact fees on roads on new developments so that we can pay for that infrastructure a little bit more as we go, which we've been failing to do for many years. Thank you.
Ms. Gallo?
Thank you. You know, the reality, I've grew up here in Austin, and the reality is that we have failed as a community to address our transportation needs over decades. And the traffic that we have now is not necessarily the result of the people moving here, but it's the result of the fact that we have not continued to improve the roads and improve our vehicle and pedestrian and bike capacity to meet the growth. Can we do it in other ways? It's difficult. You know, there's not a lot of people that come and lobby before the council for transportation. When we're doing the budget process, there are a lot of people that come down and lobby for parks and libraries and health and human services and public safety funding, but there's not a lot of people that show up and say we need more money in our transportation department's budget. So it is a challenge. We do it with bonds. I do support the $720 million bond because I think it's what we need now. We have only passed a little over $600 million in the history of doing bonds for transportation in Austin. It's time to do it. It needed to be a citywide effort, and it was important to me, though, to make sure that I advocated as the representative from District 10, and I appreciate Ms. Alter's comments about the good pieces that I was able to get into the bond, but it was important to me to advocate for District 10. We know that 360 is gridlocked. I have been talking with TxDOT long before the discussion of the bond started to start saying, okay, what are we going to do to fix that? The first step is intersection improvements. This will actually be, the $46 million in the bond will actually be matching funds. We're going to leverage our local money to be able to get those improvements. The other piece that I know, because I live in Northwest Hills and we drive it all the time, is the section of Spicewood Springs from 360 to Mesa. It is dangerous. It's one lane in each direction, and there's no left turn lanes. There's also $17 million in the bond to be able to get that portion of Spicewood to match the other portion of Spicewood from Mesa to 360, a MOPAC that's much better and much safer. The sidewalk money is important too. I actually was able to hijack some of the sidewalk money so it could be distributed more evenly to District 10, and I think that is really important for the safety of our schools.
Mr. Walker.
Yes, you know, it's very frustrating to me because I think our city has proposed a $720 million bond issue, but less than 1/7 of it goes to traffic congestion relief. $482 million goes to corridor beautification, and it's really not going to do anything for traffic. And I was talking with my wife about it, and she said, Austin doesn't need its nails done, it needs stents. We need to get traffic moving again. With respect to 360, the only $46 million is allocated. TxDOT has not formally agreed to match that yet. the 3 overpasses that are talked about are going to cost $110 million. So even if TxDOT matches it, we're going to be $18 million short. And where's that going to come from? Well, I was talking to a higher up at TxDOT over breakfast last week, and he said, well, I guess we can only build 2.5 overpasses. So, and his bottom line was, and he said, the mobility bond issue is not a rational response to our needs. And that's where I stand on it. I think we need to come up with a new bond issue in a hurry, and it needs to be traffic-centric to focus not only on District 10 issues, but also on South Austin, Brody Lane, South Mopac, the bottleneck at Riverside and I-35, where traffic during rush hour backs up practically to Congress Avenue eastbound. We have serious problems throughout the city, and we need to do something about it. This bond issue is not the answer.
Mr. Virden.
Yep. So I actually would have preferred that this bond had been broken up into 3 pieces so that Austinites could have voted on, the pieces that voted on pieces that are most pertinent to them. I do appreciate previous comments that there was some funding hijacked from parts of the budget to help improve our sidewalks in the neighborhood. That's always nice. But since the bond is going to be proposed as one giant proposal, I don't support it in its current form. I would have, like previously mentioned, it's really a beautification project, and it's going to take away a lot from or it's going to add a lot to our traffic. They're planning to take out middle turn lanes, add bus-only lanes through certain parts of town, and it's really just going to reduce accessibility in terms of driveways to shopping centers along the proposed routes that they're trying to improve. I use quotes here. So I really would have liked, I really would have liked to have seen something a little more cost-effective as well. They're proposing raising taxes again by $60, but usually these projects run over, and so there's projections that it may reach up to $125 on the median household, which is $250,000. So if you have a house more expensive than that, you're going to see your tax bill go up more than they promised, which is most District 10 residents. And there's even a more cost-effective option than this bond. So there's actually adaptive signal timing that we could use to improve traffic. So if we just upgraded all of the traffic lights in the district to actually figure out when there are a lot of cars at the intersection, the cost on that, I believe, is about $1 million to update all of the traffic lights in our district. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
And just a reminder to the candidates that we'd like to get as many questions in from the audience as we can. So if you could limit your, just be precise with your answers, and please, when you see the stop sign, to stop. Thank you very much. We are going to mix in some questions from the audience, and Ms. Gallo, we'll start with you on this one. What is your position on short-term rentals in Austin, type 1, 2, and 3?
So we had a long discussion over many, many months about short-term rentals. My office was actually the lead advocate for trying to shut down the party houses. We went to a meeting in Northwest Hills, actually, off of Cat Mountain Drive in May of 2015, April or May of 2015, and heard from the neighbors and heard what a difficult time they were having with code enforcement, not being able to actually enforce the current regulations and ordinances. So we began a process of working with neighbors, working with the code department staff to try to come to resolution on that, to increase the enforcement capacity of code by giving them additional regulations, additional ordinances to be able to tighten that down to get rid of those party houses. So as you know, we took a vote before the council. We voted to ban the type 2. So type 1 is where someone actually lives in the property and rents it out occasionally. Type 2 is an investment property. We as a council, and I supported the ban on type 2. There is a phased-in way for the existing people that have current licenses, and it's a program where they will be eliminated in a certain amount of years. If the property is sold, they can no longer operate as a Type 2, and if it is not in compliance and the license is revoked or the license is not reviewed. So we have moved, I think, in a really good direction on that. It's been a substantial difference for the party houses that we saw in District 10, and we were happy to be a part of that conversation. I don't think any of us would want to live next to the party houses that we heard about, and it was really important to our office and to me to make sure that we did what needed to be done to correct that and get our neighborhoods back and make the neighborhoods able to be lived in a positive way for the community.
Thank you. Mr. Walker.
Thank you. The Type 2 rental is problematic. The concern I have is that, excuse me, is that they're not being phased out till 2022, and that's just way too long. I mean, in our real estate market today, they could be phased out in a year. I mean, these owners can put them up for sale, or they can find longer-term tenants. So I was quite troubled by that, I guess, compromise. And the Type 1 rentals, I as a homeowner we live in Jester Estates. If my neighbors started renting out, even though they're living on the property, and they started having students live in a guest house or people from South by Southwest, and there was a turnover, I would be troubled by that. I mean, I think we have to be careful, and perhaps it needs to be done on a community-by-community basis as to what's allowed and what isn't allowed with respect to Type 1 rentals. But Type 2 rentals, I do think, need to be phased out much more quickly than the council has decided on at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Virden.
Yeah. So in terms of short-term rentals, I might take a more radical stance than some of the others sitting up here. I do think that it is somewhat dangerous to tell property owners what they can and can't do with their property, regardless of whether they live in the home or not. Right now, the council actually, on the code enforcement aspect, they actually authorized code officers to, they're able to actually go into the home to make sure that there are only, and this is part of the code, there are only like 2 people sleeping in bedrooms, whether there's a disruption or not. And so they can just walk in at any time. To me, that's a little bit troubling. So in terms of the overall issue of short-term rentals, I think that we should work with these places that are the companies that are actually enabling people to lease out their properties and institute something like a 3 strikes rule, and have escalating fines for repeat offenders, instead of just kind of banning one type but making this other type. It's not a 21st century way of doing business, and it sets a dangerous precedent for other types of uses for your property. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Alter.
So I support licensed and monitored STR1s. I do not support STR2s. I see no reason why you need to have hotels opening up in the middle of residential neighborhoods. So I do support the ban. In the interim between the 2022 and now, we need to make sure that we have serious code enforcement so that those neighbors who still live next to STR2s are not burdened by them. I also want to mention that there's an issue with STRs, that they will be coming before the state legislature. And so I want to say that I support local control in this issue and would not support any state measures to override what Austin has passed in this case. Thank you.
Last year, the city spent $684,000 to continue funding AISD's full-time parent support specialists, $520,000 to maintain AISD's prime-time after-school program, $350,000 for AISD's Cable Channel 22, and $57,000 dedicated to fund AISD's Family Resource Centers as a part of a social service contract with Health and Human Services. Will you continue this level of support? Why or why not? Mr. Walker.
That's an issue that I unfortunately do not know very much about. And I do think, I mean, as far as continuing to support it, I would need to evaluate the pros and cons of it and understand more about what it's accomplishing. One thing that I'm particularly concerned about in Austin, over on the other side of our city, over on the east side, is child development for the younger kids, because really the most important day in a child's life is the first day in kindergarten. And if that child hasn't been adequately prepared, then they start out behind and frequently never catch up. So I'm an advocate of quality preschool programs in our city that are made affordable, and perhaps this funding could be reallocated to that depending on which would be more beneficial. But I would have to examine that further. But I do say that quality preschool programs and availability to those programs is paramount in order to get our children who haven't had the benefits of those of us on the west side, to lots of being read to, lots of intellectual and mental stimulus when they're younger. I think quality preschools can provide that, and I would very much like to see that for our city.
Mr. Virden.
So I think it's great that what it sounds like is that we're investing in our communities. That's always very important. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a martial arts instructor, so any investment that I see the benefits of investing in children, making them more disciplined, helping with their education, whatever it may be. So I think that is good on the part of the city. What I would advocate is scrutinizing each of these programs to make sure that the investment that we're making is being returned to the community in a way that obviously provides more benefit on return to the community than we're putting in. So if one of those programs isn't, obviously we should decrease the funding, eliminate it, restructure it, do something better with the money so that we can help out in places that maybe need more funds for allocation. Thank you.
Ms. Alter.
May I ask you to repeat the question, please?
Sure. Last year, the city spent $684,000 to continue funding AISD's full-time parent support specialists, $520,000 to maintain AISD's prime-time after-school program, $350,000 for AISD's Cable Channel 22, and $57,000 dedicated to fund AISD's Family Resource Centers as a part of a social service contract with Health and Human Services. Will you continue this level of support? Why or why not?
Thank you. So I would continue this level of support. We have evidence that kindergarten readiness has gone down in our city about 12% over the last several years. And we know from the research that out-of-school time is one of the key factors that helps kids get on to college. As part of this discussion, we have to understand, why is it that the city has to spend this money when we have all of these taxes that are going to AISD and other school districts? And the reason is that we have a state-level finance system that captures some of our tax money that's going into education. So AISD right now is sending about $400 million to the rest of the state. If we had that money, we wouldn't have to, as a city, supplement in the same way. So I would very much advocate for the City Council to work with AISD and other school districts. District 10 has several school districts to help to change that system. There are pieces of that system that can change with respect to indexing and other pieces of that where we can potentially make a difference and keep some of that money here in Austin, and then we would be able to spend less. But it is very important that we invest in our children, whether it's the early childhood education, early childhood social services, and that out-of-school time. Thank you.
Ms. Gallo.
Ms. Alter is correct. That's the problem, is that over 50% of your school district property taxes for AISD go outside of the community. And so the school district struggles with being able to fund what needs to be funded to take care of our kids. So the city really is in a position, we do spend a lot of money on funding for health and human services for both programs and services, and taking care of our children, our younger population, should be part of that funding. Earlier this year, the mayor talked about a potential tax swap with the school district, and it was some interesting conversation, but as we looked at it more closely, there were some issues with it. We have other school districts, this was just going to be with AISD, we have other school districts that are in District 10 or in the city limits, and we also have an issue with senior population because the school district gives a senior tax freeze, and if there's going to be an inequity, we want to make sure that the senior population is not at a disadvantage. So that's been tabled for now, but I think at this point that the budget was one of the places that we could continue to be able to support those programs. We do have to be careful that we have equity with the other school districts because we're doing this for AISD. I think it's important for us not to exclude the other school districts if they need assistance and they need to be part of the conversation. So I think we have to be very careful with that also. We have two great trustees that represent the schools in District 10. Julie Cowan actually lives here in Northwest Hills, and as far as being able to advocate and talk and work on plans, you know, we have at my office and I have a really good relationship with both of them, and we work on a lot of projects, but we're really blessed in the District 10 community to have two great trustees that represent us at this point.
I wish we had another 2 hours to ask lots of questions, and we do have other questions from the audience, and the league has other questions, but we are going to have to limit our time. So we are going to ask you to do your 2-minute closing statement. If there's any issue, a pressing issue that you did not get to, please, you may mention it now within the 2 minutes. And we are going to start with you, Mr. Virden, on the closing statements.
Well, okay. So I think we addressed a lot of great things, or a lot of great topics at this forum, so thank you all for attending. Like I said before, and again, a recap of my stances, you know, against the mobility bond as it stands now. Community policing, we definitely need more of that, but as was mentioned before, we have more property crimes than violent crimes here. So I think that definitely will help more with community engagement than to actually, you know, than the whole body camera issue. Like I said before, I'm also against things like zoning and or in large, by and large, zoning and land use regulations. It's driving up the cost of the homes and the rent in apartments here in District 10. And so it's really important that we look to alternate forms of housing so that we can mitigate these property tax increases. Even if the bond, you know, even if the mobility bond, for example, does pass this coming time, we're still going to see a property tax increase. We're still going to see even greater property tax increases, even if they extended a homestead exemption or something like that. I'm trying to think of other things to say, but I don't really have them right now. So thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Ms. Alter.
Thank you. So in this race, I think a central question is how we're going to manage our growth, who's going to benefit, where it's going to take place, and who gets to sit at the table when we have those discussions. We have a big set of issues coming up with Code Next, with the Land Development Code coming out in January. How that process happens is going to be very important to our quality of life. I think that I would be a good representative of District 10 and the voices of the people and the voices of the neighborhood through that process. We have to find a way to welcome the talent that is coming in. We are the envy of every other city that we have this tremendously talented population coming in. At the same time, we have to recognize that people are coming here because there's something worth saving. Austin is a wonderful place, and we need to find the right balance for that. We need to find the balance where we can find our position on growth that's not NIMBY and is not density at all costs, but ends up at a place that we might call common sense. And I think that we can get there with the right leadership and with bringing everyone around the table and going to that place and to those conversations with open minds and trying to understand that we all want Austin to be a great place for all of us to live, because after all, we all call Austin home. So I'm Alison Alter, and I hope to be your next District 10 representative. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gallo, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters and to everyone that has been here this evening. I don't have a PhD, but honestly, I have received the best education possible in the last 2 years. And learning everything that I could about running the 11th largest city in the nation and managing a $3.7 billion budget, I could have probably earned a PhD in 20 different policy areas. It has been amazing, at times overwhelming, but a really fascinating experience. Many of you know that I've spent the last 35 years as a residential realtor in Austin. I am honored to have the endorsements of both the Austin Board of Realtors and the Home Builders Association of Central Texas. We need, as we've talked about, fire, EMS, and police to keep our community safe. Because of my advocacy for public safety through my policy decisions, I have been endorsed by the Austin Police Association and the Austin Firefighters Association. I have also been honored to earn the bipartisan support of 5 former mayors and 2 former mayor pro tems who live in District 10. From the far left, I've been endorsed by Mayor Frank Cooksey. From the far right, I have been endorsed by Mayor Ron Mullen. And in between, I have the endorsements of Mayor Bruce Todd, Lee Leffingwell, Lee Cook, and Mayor pro tem Brewster McCracken. But most important to me, I've been endorsed by Mayor pro tem Edgar Perry, who happens to be my amazing father. And the person, who has showed me throughout his life that public service is the rent you pay to live in a community. He was not able to be here tonight because of health issues, but I know he's watching on TV. Dad, I love you, and I appreciate the role model that you have been for me. My family has lived in Austin for 6 generations, and I love this city dearly. And I want to make sure through my hard work that it continues to be a great place for my kids to live, just as it has been for me. So I thank you all of you for giving me the opportunity to represent what I think is the best district in Austin. It has been an honor, and I ask for your vote so I continue to be the voice that represents you in every neighborhood in District 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gallo. Mr. Walker.
You know, my hope for this city, which I very much love and have enjoyed for many years. My wife came here in 1976. I came here in 1984, is ease of living. That's why a lot of us came here in the first place. This was a great place to live, and it's become a lot harder to live now here. And so I want to see things done that will bring back some of that ease. I don't think we're ever going to get back to where we were, but Austin deserves better than the mobility bond as presently proposed. Another aspect of ease of living is Uber and Lyft. Our daughter used to get off work in SoCo at midnight. The bus service came irregularly, and the Uber and Lyft option was a safe way that we could track on our cell phone at home. We could call the driver while the driver was taking her back to her apartment. It was a real blessing. But I would like to say that I taught taxation and finance at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. for 10 years, and cost accounting is a part of that. I have the tools, the analytic ability, the accounting ability, the budgetary ability to do the analysis necessary to bring our city back to a more affordable level. I don't know if you realize it, but the tax on a median home in 2005 has gone up from $800 and some to over $1,400 and some. Adjusted for inflation, it's gone from $1,000 to $1,464, or a 45% increase adjusted just for inflation. I hope to do something about that as your next city council representative, and I'm honored to be here tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, it's your turn. Let's give. Oops, sorry, it's not on. Oh, okay. Let's give them a round of applause, these good candidates. Thank you. Thank you, candidates. We want to thank the Ethics Review Commission, the Spanish translator, the Jewish Community Center, the city staff who set this room up, and the Austin League of Women Voters volunteers. The League hopes that this forum has helped you become informed about the city folks who represent you on City Council. This is a very important election, and your participation is vital to our democracy. The League also publishes a nonpartisan voters guide, which will be in the Austin American Statesman on Sunday, October the 23rd, which is the day before early voting, which begins on the 24th. It will also be online at lwvaustin.org. Election day is November the 8th, and you may vote at any polling place that has a sign that says "Vote Here." If you do not have a photo ID, you may bring other identifying things like a utility bill in your name or your voter registration card. The League website has a fuller information on all of the required identifications that that will allow you to vote. More people can vote now than they could at the last election. There are great pamphlets on the table back there that tell you all you might want to know about early voting, which will be particularly important at this for this election. The city clerk is anticipating possibly very long lines on November the 8th, so please vote early. Thank you again. The table at the back, also, if you need to change your voter registration, if you've moved or whatever, we can accommodate that, or if you are not registered, which I hope none of you fit that bill. You can adjust your, you can make new voter registrations. Yes, sir?
With all due respect, I would like to hear the candidates' comments about the Austin Oaks Bud. That was asked as the first question, and we never got an answer on Austin Oaks. They discussed the Bud and the other Bud. I want to hear about Austin Oaks.
Well, we don't have any time. We are time limited. I'm so sorry. We had a lot of other questions for them. Thank you again for your attendance at this forum, and tell your friends and neighbors to join you at the poll. Thank you for coming. Thank you, candidate.